What's going on, everyone, and welcome to the Landlording Show. This is the show for once you have got an investment bug, once you buy your first property, where do you go from here? How do you run your property so that you can be successful and make sure that you are cash flowing and making money in your investments, and that your investments don't become a second full-time job for you. Here is where you can come for all the advice on how to best run your investments. My name is Tim Harstead. I am a property manager on the south side of Chicago. We manage over 300 homes and have dealt with anything that you can think of. And I'm here to share our advice to you so that you can manage your properties and be successful with your investments. So today I wanted to talk about leases. And there's some things that I think a lot of people don't put in their leases. I think a lot of people, at least in the Chicagoland area, just use what's called the car lease, which is the Chicago Association of Realtors Chicago lease. And it's a good starting point. It's a good jumping off point. But it is purposely made to be as vague as possible. It is purposely made to follow all the rules, make sure that anything that legally has to be said in the lease is there, but it doesn't do anything to go beyond that. It doesn't actually help you as a landlord beyond having a legal lease and making sure that everything is tight legally. But there's a lot more that you can put in a lease that will help you to better run your property and make sure that you're taken care of. So the first thing I want to talk about is just an overall philosophy. Most leases, and again, I'm attacking the car lease, and we use the car lease, but we put an addendum on it so that it's a little bit longer, which it's already a super long lease, but unfortunately the RLTO makes us have these super long leases. So the first thing is, most people, when they sign a lease with the tenant, the only form of punishment for breaking the lease is to end the lease. Meaning that if your tenant is doing something that is a violation of the lease, you either can live with it or you can start an eviction, which in Chicago at least means 6 to 8 months of not collecting rent, because you're not allowed to collect rent during an eviction. Even if it's for smoking, you can't collect rent because that's you saying that you're actually accepting them as a tenant again. So we have to stop collecting rent. We have to go to court, try to kick them out. 6 to 8 months, no rent. That's not a win for anyone. And yeah, wow, you really showed them for not smoking in your unit at that point when you're out 8 months of income. So overriding thing that I don't see is fines for violations of leases. And it's a huge thing. So if someone smokes, when you go to a hotel, right, it's a no smoking hotel. But it's not just, they don't just put signs out and say, okay, whatever. It literally says everywhere in bold letters, if caught smoking or if we smell smoke there, you're going to be fined X amount of dollars. And us as landlords for long-term and short-term, if you're a short-term landlord, should have something very similar. So I'm going to start with that one just because I'm already, giving that as an example. Smoking. So there's a reason you don't want any smoking in your apartments, right? One, if it's a multi-unit building, you're hurting the experience for all the other tenants because one tenant wants to smoke in the unit. Now all of the tenants have to smell that smoke and have to live with it. So that's number one. We want to make sure that everyone has peaceful, quiet enjoyment of their own home and that another tenant's not ruining it. Number two is the damage it does. When a tenant's smoking in your property, the walls are going to start to go yellow much quicker. The smell of a heavy cigarette smoker, it doesn't leave. I mean, you have to use ozone machine. You have to paint the entire property, even if the walls look okay. To get that smell out of the walls, you have to paint that property maybe once or twice, 2 coats to get that smell to go away. So it's a big thing. So we want to make sure that we can prevent that. Now, something that has changed, at least here in Illinois and probably about half the states now, is marijuana is legal. So a lot of our leases used to say no smoking of tobacco and no doing illegal drugs. Well, now we have to add marijuana in there. So we have to make sure the lease says no smoking of any kind, marijuana or tobacco, no using any illegal drugs. And here's a bonus one, because what's the number one thing that you get if someone's smoking marijuana when they're not supposed to be? I lit an incense. So you know what? An incense is a fire risk. Let's also make sure that they're not using that. So let's put in our lease a clause that says, hey, no smoking of tobacco, no smoking of marijuana, no lighting of incense, and no using of illegal drugs on the premises. And if caught doing so, we are going to fine you X amount per occurrence that we see you smoking. And this will eliminate them from smoking. This will make them go step outside. And hey, you know, I smoke cigars from time to time at my house. I don't do it inside because I don't want that effect in my house, and I don't want it in my apartment. So it's a huge deal. All right, let's talk about pets. I think the days of not allowing pets in your units is over. I mean, it's just there are so many people with pets now. I think that the last stat I saw was like 70% of renters have a dog or a cat. So if we're not allowing dogs and cats in units, we have a 30% pool to find the best tenant possible. And we want a tenant that's going to stay a long time, pay their rent on time, all those things, but we're only pulling from 30%. It just doesn't make sense. So we need to start to work towards how do we allow them. So one is to increase the rent for pets. So having pet rent is a big thing. And people love their dogs. They're willing to pay to have their dogs there. And it's an amenity that they get. The dogs are going to cause damage, but because we're charging for it, we already know, hey, our turnover is going to be a little more expensive, but we're getting an extra $50 a month. So that's going to offset the cost and allow us to have this tenant stay here longer, enjoy their place, and get a better quality tenant because we have a wider pool. So one is charging pet rent. The second part of that, though, is what if they say they don't have a pet? Okay. We want to make sure that when they sign and say, I don't have a pet, that they understand that there is going to be a penalty if they are caught babysitting a pet, if they are caught having a friend's pet over, if they have a dog there. So we have a daily fee. So we do an inspection and there's a dog there from the time that we do the inspection to when you say the dog is gone and we reinspect it. We're charging you X amount per day. And once that is once you say the animal's gone, we're going to charge you an inspection fee to come by and make sure that there's no, that not just that the dog's out for a walk when we're there, but we want to make sure that there's no cages there, no dog food, no signs that they're coming back as soon as we leave. So we'll look through all that, make sure all that's good, and then relieve the fee for them. What else is a good one to have that you need? Lockout fees. I see too many landlords that are, get a call at 2 a.m. that their tenant was at the club and lost their keys and can't get in, and they jump to go drive over there, and then they complain about how hard it is to be a landlord. It's a really easy thing. We in our leases, it specifically says if you get locked out after hours, you're responsible for calling a locksmith and having them come out. End of day. And if it's during business hours, you can call us and we'll come, but we're going to charge you as well. So if you're wasting our gas, our time for a key that you lost, we're going to charge you. And if it's middle of the night, yes, it's an emergency, but that emergency is something that we can't fix at 2 a.m. You need to call a locksmith and have them come out. That's your responsibility to not lose your keys. And it's your responsibility to have someone that has a backup of your keys. And we explain that to tenants. And that's something that I think a lot of landlords don't do, is sit down and explain parts of their lease to their tenants so that their tenants truly understand what the fines are. And frankly, the goal of all of these is never to collect a dime. We never want to collect a fine. We will if we have to. And it's extra revenue and it's great and all that, but we never want to collect the fine. We want the tenant to obey the lease, and we don't want to have to go through an eviction to get them to obey the lease. And too many people, when you just call them and say, hey, you're breaking the lease, please stop, please, 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 they don't do anything. So we really can't rely on that. We need to have some kind of system where, hey, when you have this issue, you need to pay a fine and you need to stop doing what you're doing. Another big one that we have in our lease is missed appointments. So you call out a plumber, the plumber says, "Hey, I'll be there. I'll be there Saturday at 1, since that's when the tenant's going to be home. We're going to fix them, fix the toilet, fix the leak, whatever's going on." And then the plumber shows up at 1 and the tenant's not home to let them in. Well, the tenant made that appointment and thus now needs to pay that fee, because guess what? That plumber's probably going to charge you a trip fee. And so you shouldn't incur that and have to be out money because the tenant wasn't there. So in the lease, if you have a missed appointment with a vendor, we have a trip fee that we charge the tenants, so that way we can pay our vendors their trip fee. And even if the vendor is not asking for it, offer the vendor that. Say, "Hey, I'm so sorry that happened. Can I pay you $100 just for your trip fee? And can you come back tomorrow?" And watch that relationship that you can build with those vendors by, instead of being a cheap ass and trying to say, "Oh, that's the tenant's fault. Sorry, just whatever." That vendor's not coming back out for you when you need them now. But if you start to offer that and you start to pay the vendors, a trip fee, and a lot of them are just going to charge you anyways, get that from the tenant so you're not losing money, and it's not as big of a deal anymore. The other one that I want to talk about is a sort of violation fee, is unauthorized person. So we have very strict rules, at least in the RLTO, of when a person's a tenant and when they're just visiting. And it's, generally if they're there for more than 3 consecutive nights, they're considered to be occupying the property. And yeah, sometimes you'll have someone over, and that's fine. But if you start to see different names on the mailbox, and you start to see that someone is always there, you've never screened that person. You don't know who they are. You don't know what crimes they've committed. You don't know what they're going to do. And worse yet, I know this is sort of the dark side of things, but if someone's living there and they have bad credit and they're not going to pay, and something happens to the main tenant, whether they get sick or decide to leave, a lot of times those unauthorized tenants have keys and they don't leave with the good tenant. So you screen the good tenant's there, but they have a new boyfriend that's a dick, and they just decide, "Hey, my lease is over, I'm moving out," but the new boyfriend doesn't. Now you have to go through an 8-month eviction process because you didn't nip it in the bud when you had the chance. So having a per day again occurrence of, hey, you have someone that is unauthorized living in your apartment, they need to move back out, or they need to fill out all the paperwork, be screened, and get approved to be in the lease, is a huge thing. Now, the last one I want to talk about is month-to-month tenancy. So Chicago during COVID made it really, really hard to renew tenants and to move them out because, frankly, I don't know about you, but my tenants don't really know what they want to do 5 or 6 months before the lease is out. Most tenants, especially younger tenants, haven't, they think through the month before of where they want to move, and they don't know what apartments are going to be available. So how is it possible for them to know if they're going to move out? So with that being said, we will give the lease renewal 4 months out, and that's fine. But what if they don't sign it? What if they become holdover tenants? So now you have an option. If your lease says nothing, you have a couple options. One is to just accept the money, let them stay as holdover tenants. You don't get your increase. You have to then serve notice to vacate and say, "Hey, now I'm giving you 120 days to leave," because that's the new rules. You can't just give them 30-day notice. You have to give them 120-day notice. So now you're giving them that notice. To combat all that, what we started putting in is month-to-month fees. So our leases automatically roll over to a higher price on the 13th month. So if a tenant doesn't re-sign or sign a new lease and they hold over to month 13, we have a month-to-month fee or an automatic increase in the lease. So it's just like doing a 2-year lease with an automatic increase, but we make where the increase is higher than normal. So it's something that would be beneficial for them to sign a lease because they would be saving a few $100 a month by signing a new lease. Some tenants will pay the increase, the 20, the percentage that you're raising the rent, and they only want to be there for another month or two, and it's worth it for them, and that's fine because you're now getting that month to month, that short-term rental price versus having a long-term lease at a discount. And so by doing that, we're able to say, "Hey, tenant, you need to sign this lease or tell us you're moving out and move out. Otherwise, this is what next month's rent's going to be." And then we can use that to to force an eviction if we have to, faster than a holdover tenant eviction. So those are the things that I think are very important that people leave out of their leases, that I think that you should have in your leases. I'd love to hear more. Comment below. Tell me what else you would put in your lease. What other things I'm missing? Love to hear from you. Let me know if you have any other questions that you want answered on another show. Comment below. Tell us what you think, and give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll talk to everyone later.